Hey everybody, it's Miss Susan, and thanks for joining me for another of Miss Susan's favorite books for story time. Today we're going to talk about Groundhog's Day. Groundhog's Day happens February 2nd every year. This is the time where we wait to see if that groundhog and when that groundhog comes out of his den and if he sees his shadow or not. Because you know, when he sees his shadow, that means 6 more weeks of winter. But if he doesn't, that means we're going to have an early spring. But when you're talking to your toddlers and 2-year-olds and preschoolers, they don't necessarily know what we're talking about. I mean, when you're talking about the theme of Groundhog's Day, there's 3 different things you can talk about. You can explain what is a groundhog. You can explain what is Groundhog's Day and why we celebrate it. But the whole reason that we watch this little creature come out of his burrow is to see if he sees his shadow. So then we have a third thing, explaining to your little ones what is a shadow. So it can be a little tricky talking about all of those things during your story time. But I think I have found some good stories that you'll enjoy that'll capture all 3 of those topics. And of course, you can always break it up too. If you talk about Groundhog's Day a week before the actual day, you can spend a little more time reading stories, doing craft activities, early literacy activities to be able to talk about all 3. But when it comes to story time at the library, I only have 1 day to cover this theme. So I try to cover them all at once. So here we go. For starters, and there isn't any rhyme or reason of where to start, but I go ahead and I'm going to start with Groundhog's Day. This is the thing that kids are going to be hearing parents talk about, older siblings talk about. So we need to explain to them what is Groundhog's Day. And this is a really good book. I enjoy this book because it has a lot of pictures, vibrant pictures of the groundhog. It talks a little bit about how the holiday started, which was back in the 1700s. Who thought of it? Why they brought it to the United States, and so on and so forth. So it gives some information, but they're short tidbits of information, which is perfect for a little one to sit and listen to. It talks about how they brought this custom to Pennsylvania and how now we have Puxatawny Phil. If you guys watch the news on February 2nd, he's the one that we're all waiting for to see if he sees his shadow. So it explains about him too. But this is a really fun and informative book that talks just about the holiday of Groundhog's Day and what it is. Well, if you talk about Groundhog's Day, then you got to talk about a groundhog. And don't worry, I'll have the author's name in the descriptions down below, so don't worry about it. So if you want to find these books at your local library, if you want to purchase them yourself, I'll have all the information down below. Now, I love this series, Pebble Plus. I try to find anytime I'm doing a book about a real life animal or person, I try to find this series because I love it. It's a big book. It's great pictures, very informative. This book does the same thing. It tells kids that groundhogs are also called woodchucks. It shows a map of where they're located, which is wonderful. Talks about what it eats, it talks about how big it gets, it talks about how many babies that they have. So this is a very fun nonfiction book. It's an informative book, and I love reading nonfiction books because little ones don't always have an opportunity to actually see these types of animals that we might be talking about. So beautiful pictures inside this book. So it's just called Groundhogs. So then we got to talk about what is a shadow, because kids are going to be you're going to be talking about how we're following this animal, we're waiting for him to see his shadow, because this is going to determine if we're going to have an early spring or 6 more weeks of winter. So you have to talk about shadows. So one good book that I have is called Discover Shadows. And I enjoy this book because this book, it shows pictures of children having shadows, and it talks the difference about, it has to be a bright light or a sunny day to see your shadow. If it's a cloudy day, you're not going to be able to see your shadow. What I like about it too, it gets bigger, and it talks about how night is an even bigger shadow. earth is always spinning. During the day, your side of the earth is facing the sun. At night, your side of the earth is away from the sun, so you are in the earth's shadow. So this is very fun and informative. It's called Discover Shadows. There's another book that's better. Our library didn't have it. It's called Follow It, Learn About Shadows, which is the same series. But again, I'll have the information in the description. Both books are great for little ones to be able to talk about what is a shadow. Okay, so we've hit all 3 topics. What is Groundhog's Day? What is a groundhog? And what is a shadow? So now for the fun stories. So the first one, sticking with shadows, is who will see their shadows this year? This story is absolutely adorable. There's a bunch of animals who are fed up with everybody talking about Groundhog's Day and the groundhog shadow. And if the groundhog sees his shadow, it's going to determine if we're going to have spring or not. So these animals are saying, well, I have shadows too. Let's see what happens when I see my shadow. So we've got this animal right here. He says, okay, what about my shadow? Well, look what happens. There's a rainstorm. Well, what about the polar bear? He's got a shadow. What happens when he sees his shadows? Oh no, there's a snowstorm. Or this camel. What happens when he sees his shadows? Sandstorm. So this is a really cute, funny story too. Your children are gonna love it. It continues to talk about shadows, but it shows instead of spring, what happens when other animals see their shadows. So this is a cute fiction story. I enjoy this one. You have another one. So February 2nd in most places, like here in Illinois, it's cold and it's snowy on February 2nd. So this is an adorable book called The Snowman, the Owl, and the Groundhog. It's about a snowman who understands that when the groundhog sees his shadow, what could possibly happen season-wise? But he's a snowman. He doesn't want to melt. He's very concerned about what happens if they do have an early spring. So he tries to persuade the groundhog not to come out of his burrow. He's like, stay, stay, stay. I'll give you my hat. I'll give you my scarf. I'll give you everything, but just stay down there because I don't want to melt. I want to stay here forever. And it's the groundhog and the owl that are the ones that try to let the snowman know it's okay. Even if you do melt, don't worry about it. The children will remember building you. The children will remember the fun time that they had with you. And don't worry, you'll be back again next year. And of course, he was rebuilt next year. So this is a really, really fun story. You can't have a story without you can't have a story time without a counting story. So 10 Grouchy Groundhogs is one of my favorites too. This is a cute story about 10 Grouchy Groundhogs all living together and what it's like to be crowded. But it's a cute little sing-song story. 10 Grouchy Groundhogs crowded in their den. They squirmed and they stretched, and then, one Grouchy Groundhog announced with a shout, "This den is too small. Let me out, out, out." 9 grubby groundhogs working in their den. They clawed and they dug, and then, one grubby groundhog announced with a shout, "I gotta have a bath. Let me out, out, out." And it keeps going on, just like 10 in the bed. It's 10 Grouchy Groundhogs. They all want out of the den until, of course, there's just one Grouchy Groundhog just left in the den. And what happens? They all come out, the snow is melted, and they can play outside again. So that's a really cute story. And the last one that I have for today is called "Twas the Night Before Groundhog's Day." Very similar to "Twas the Night Before Christmas." It has the same type of dialogue with it. "'Twas the night before Groundhog Day, and all through our town, everyone is waiting for tomorrow's countdown. Because in the morning, when we all come together, a groundhog will wake up and forecast the weather." And it goes on and on and on. So this is a cute story too. It also talks about how everybody is waiting for this groundhog to come out of his burrow so we can see, is it going to be spring? Is it going to be winter? They're going to wait for him to tell the forecast. So this is a fun book too. So anyway, my name is Miss Susan. Those are all the selections that I have for Groundhog's Day. If you read other stories during your Groundhog's Day story time, please leave it in the comments below. Or if you just talk about groundhogs, or if you just talk about shadows, leave the titles and the authors in the comments below. As I always say, I'm trying to grow my book list so that each year I'm not always reading the same stories. I'm reading something different. So if you have other suggestions, again, please leave it in the comments below. But I want to thank you guys so much for hanging out with me today. Have a great day. Bye.